All right, so with that, I gave a little bit of the introduction, but you might be wondering, okay, so when is this going to impact me? Strengthening organic enforcement is actually coming very, very quickly. SOE is coming into enforcement in March of 2024. So if you're doing your quick math, that's 8 months from today. When you account for the holidays, that's 6 months. And when you account for a normal certification process for an organic company, it's about 60 to 90 days. So 3 months to get certified. You effectively have 3 months more if you have any impact to your supply chain that requires certification. So it's probably the time and moment to really understand if it's going to impact you or not. And SOE came about because, unfortunately, we had some issues of fraud within the organic space. And the industry rose up and committed each other to having more strict regulations to make sure that the label and everything that you've invested in it all of these years is maintained and is actually enforced. And so that's where SOE came from. The 2018 Farm Bill, all of your voices being heard, funding being allocated to the USDA NOP, and significant changes to improve, add traceability, add confidence to the label that people purchase, and to the market that continues to grow, over $60 billion at this point. Great. So with that, we're going to explore different facets of SOE through everybody's proficiencies here. Okay, so we'll start with Bill. All right. So one of the things that SOE addresses is actually imported products. So every product that comes now into the United States, irrespective of which country, is going to have an import certificate, an import transaction. That will happen through the Organic Integrity Database. As a big importer of product from around the globe, as Driscoll's, how do you see that impacting you?
Yeah. So
question, right?
Yeah. Softball.
Yeah. Exactly right. So this is it could potentially be a very scary thing. In the strengthening organic regulation, there's kind of like a sliding scale of pain, right? So it says that every import needs to be associated with an import certificate. It doesn't say that every import has to have an import certificate. It just needs to be associated with one. And it says that the certifying body or the certifying agent can determine whether you need an import certificate for every shipment or whether you need one for the entire season or the entire year. And so you can imagine if every truck that came across the border needed to have a certificate associated with that truck, that would be extremely heavy, right? That would be just mountains of paperwork to complete. And on the other side of that, if you had just one import certificate for all of your shipments that you were doing from a certain area, that would be extremely light, right? And how that regulation gets interpreted and gets enforced has to do with the certifying body or the certifying agent. So you work with the certifying agent to say, okay, based off of the control that we have and the capacity that we have, we feel that we can have this many certificates, or one certificate per year, or one certificate per month, or that sliding scale of pain. It's kind of like if you take someone on a date and then you go to the car and sitting in the back seat is this massive Rottweiler, and you're like, whoa, what's with the Rottweiler? And they're like, oh, killer, don't worry about him. He's just here to make sure you behave. And so that's what that sliding scale of pain is for, is just to make sure that that all of us behave. Because if the certifier has doubts about our capacity or ability to control, then they have a really big stick that they can use to impact our ability to be a profitable company.
I mean, I think the thing, too, to think about with the import certificates is it's not just an added layer of paperwork that's required. What's the intent, right? What was the intent of SOE and the intent of why we need to have all of this transparency really about not just the shipments, but the amount of product? And that gets back down to fraud, right? So if we're actually going to have these transaction certificates, what was the actual point? Is to be able to say, okay, within your certifier, we'll look at your supply chain and say, within your suppliers, do you have the pounds and acreage to be able to be importing this amount of product. It's effectively trying to get at, if you're able to produce 1,000 pounds, that you're not actually importing 5,000 pounds from somebody. So that's the intention of these import certificates and transactions, is that the certifiers are going to have better visibility into effectively mass balances, which are also required under SOE. So anyone who's ever gone through an organic inspection knows one of the fun exercises that you'll have to do, which is that mass balance, and that's what they're getting at, right? You're not selling more than what you could have theoretically produced, and that's the importance of these import certificates. But I think what's not clear, right, is it a season, is it a shipment, and that's probably, how do you see that impact Driscoll's? Is it going to matter if it's one shipment? Is it going to be the season? Like, what is your leaning towards how you might approach either of those scenarios?
Well, we're certainly going to go ahead and say, hey, what is the largest piece of, it says season in the regulation, so we're certainly going to push for an entire season. But it does add, the mass balance piece adds another wrinkle, because we generally know how much a field is going to produce, but sometimes it's sunny and sometimes it rains, right? And so, our ability to predict how much a particular field can produce is not 100%, and will never be. And so, there certainly is going to be quite a bit of give and take with the certifying body to say, hey, this is what we think it is. Here's what the actual number is. And I think it has a lot to do with the amount of transparency that we can demonstrate to the certifying body.
I think, can you still hear me? Okay. I think there's something as well to say to that, is that you all should be speaking to whomever your certifiers are, because there may be different interpretations and different infrastructures that these certifiers have to be able to meet your capacity needs when it comes to import certificates. So that's what we learn on that. Another unique thing about SOE is that there's this, the intention effectively was to eliminate or minimize the amount of people who are not certified. So that as you're in the organic industry and you're dealing with your business transactions, everyone throughout the supply chain mostly needs to be certified. Given that, there's a different criteria for how you figure out if you need to be certified. And one of those things is actually about tamper-evident packaging. And it's very much front and center in SOE, is that it's the only standard I can actually think about that goes off of not your product per se, but how it's packaged. And berries would be a really good example. So berries are in clamshells. They don't always have a film or a sticker that would be technically a tamper-evident seal. So how do you see that impacting Driscoll's?
So hopefully that will not impact us. So all of our supply chain is organic certified already. So our growers are organic certified. The coolers that they go into are organic certified. So we don't have a need to move to tamper-evident packaging for our own purpose, right? Now it could be that someone further down the line is not certified, and like a wholesaler or maybe a warehouse, some other warehouse is not certified, and they say, hey, we don't want to be certified. We want to fall into this exemption that says if you only deal with tamper-evident packaging and none of that packaging is removed, then you don't have to be certified. So we would like to fall into that exemption. And so then they could try to lean on Driscoll's and say, we want you to change your packaging to make our life a little bit easier. And that is not a happy place for us, right? So our packaging is how we present our product, and adding more plastic to our organic product is not something that we're excited about doing.
Okay. And you queued up Brenna here as the wholesaler. All right. So Organically Grown Company, very well-known organic certified wholesaler distributor. And I think there's a lot of learnings in my own discussions with the industry about how SOE is going to happen, how it's going to change the industry. I think there's a lot to learn from what you guys have been doing already, having been certified for so long. So I think as you looked at SOE, if you could give examples to the audience here as to where you might expect the pain points to be based on what you guys have experienced previously.
Yeah, absolutely. Is this on? Okay, good. I don't know why I can't hear myself. I don't have a monitor like a rock star would or something with little earbuds. Oh, you can hear me? Okay, thanks. Yeah, so, OGC has been certified in Portland and Eugene facilities for more than 25 years, as you pointed out. I mean, we've been integral in the development of the Organic Food Production Act and all of the organic policy in the state of Oregon. We have a couple lessons learned to share with y'all. The first one really is that we view the organic certification inspection as an opportunity for continuous improvement. So new policies coming out, making sure we're on our guard, making sure we're doing the best we can for consumers, because we know that eaters and shoppers are relying on us to have a very solid supply chain. They're spending their hard-earned money on this stuff, and they deserve to have that. And so really using it as a continuous improvement opportunity is really important. The second thing is that it is also an opportunity to stay in touch with regulations in the regulatory world and to kind of stay ahead of the game and be involved. And so that's the other piece. But I'll just say the third piece that, if I could rewrite 25 years ago, and I was probably listening to Nirvana or Pearl Jam or something, maybe I still am. Yeah, okay, I see you. 25 years ago, we had to do a lot of training. So really educating and thinking about how to educate your coworkers, and also thinking about how to educate your entire supply chain up and down the supply chain is really a great thing. So those are two of the key kind of lessons learned. I will say one of the positive things about this new rule that's really exciting, and I mean, regulations aren't exciting, but exciting-ish.
For some. Sell the session here.
The standardization of the certificates. So if you remember this, the world, I keep rewinding to the 90s or whatever, but we used to have these material safety data sheets that we had, and none of them were the same. And so your arm could be burning with acid on it, and you're looking like, what do I put on this? Oh, yeah, baking soda. This new regulation really they standardized that, which made the world safer for everybody, because then you could look and see, oh yeah, this is how I do first aid. So this certificate standardization is going to help all of us in the trade really be able to look and verify and build better supply chain transparency. So there's that. And for the record, I'm from Seattle, so I am still listening to Nirvana.
And if you don't mind, I could take my hair down. People do say Eddie Vedder is a
yeah,
little dumb.
But yeah, you do.
Thank you for bringing that up.
I've seen him many times.
Thanks, Brenna. I think one thing I want to further flesh out about that, right? So the OID, we talked about it in respect to the transaction certificates, but it's also what she just mentioned, is that every certified entity for NOP Organics is going to be in this database, as will be their certificate. So raise your hand if you've ever had to manage the supply chain certificates. Just got a lot easier.
Yeah.
And they will be actively updated. If somebody's certificate is rescinded, there's a 3-day requirement for certifiers to have that updated in OID. So what we're effectively getting is a very dynamic system that gives you full transparency into the organic supply chain. Equivalency agreements with other countries are also going to be pulled into NOP. So as you look at the functionality of that tool, it's not just, is your product coming over with the import transaction certificate? It's also going to have all of their information, their certificates. It makes your job easier to monitor your own supply chain, giving you that transparency. Nobody wanted fraud, and these tools are actually coming into our realm such that they can be really productive, efficient tools for us to get visibility into supply chain acreage, the items that you're certified by. So there's a lot of functionality in that OID website, and when you think about other standards, whether it be food safety standards or whatnot, it's something we haven't ever seen actually from a regulatory perspective. So in that, if you haven't checked out the OID database, the integrity database, I would suggest doing so. It will become your best friend, especially as certificates are uploaded into them by every certifier. Okay. One of the things that you mentioned in respect to knowing one up and one down, really important. Yeah. And that's what you've learned over these 25 years. I think that can't be further emphasized right now with SOE, is that I think we always knew we needed to know where we were getting the product from. That seemed relatively straightforward. We'd have to have the certificate. What I don't think the industry necessarily understands now is that the organic status of your product is dependent on the organic supply chain being correct after it leaves your hands.
Yes.
So really knowing at least one step further is really important, if not further than that, because effectively, on paper, your organically labeled product, if it goes through the wrong entity, is no longer organic. So really thinking about how do I know my supply chain, how do I know who I'm selling it to, I think that's can't be emphasized enough, right?
Yeah.
I think, so if you could speak to as well, being like a distributor, wholesaler, is like, you know who you're selling it to, but what does that like last minute got to change things because something happened with the truck mean in produce, and how that might impact the product, cross-docking and those things?
Yeah, well, I'll first share that we have our 2 Portland Eugene facilities certified, which you know, but we're also going to be certifying our cross docks and any other storage facilities that we're in. So just want you to know that we're already kind of working on that. Not just kind of, we're already working on that.
March 2024.
That's right. And we're right now reaching out to our suppliers and our customers and just up and down the supply chain with a letter to let them know that this rule is coming and these are the requirements, and really to try to lift everyone's boat so that we can help the trade itself really improve and make sure our supply chain is solid. I mean, the other thing about this rule is that even though it's this incredible new addition to or amendment to the Organic Food Production Act, it also creates a situation where we don't want to lose track of this of the idea that there are still high risk commodities in the supply chain, and so we are still going to be drilling down really deeply into those high risk commodities so that we can make sure that our supply chain is transparent and solid. And again, we're doing that for our customers. We're doing that so that eaters know that the product they're getting is organic and that they can have confidence in that seal. And it's especially important now with all of the pressure from conventional regenerative that we keep the organic seal strong and that people have strong confidence in it. So it's more than just us. It's about the entire organic trade and how do we help each other really comply with this new rule.
Yeah, I think that's a really good emphasis, and something you mentioned in that discussion as well is about your fraud prevention plans, right? So you just mentioned high risk, and we hear a lot about that in produce, high risk food safety items. There's regulations coming down the pike on that, but we also see that within organic, and in some cases they may be different, right? So we're not necessarily looking at food safety, we're looking at economic adulteration and where there may be higher opportunity for risk to impact your supply chain. One of the new requirements in SOE is actually a fraud prevention plan. So to add into the theme of every other regulation that keeps saying risk-based, there's a lot of risk-based in SOE, both at the certifier level, having to figure out how to identify where they need to put their time and resources really into their own certified entities, but also within every certified operation, you now have to have an organic fraud prevention plan. And it's a risk assessment. It's a risk assessment for how do you allocate your resources to make sure that where there's highest opportunity for risk, you're addressing it. And so what Brenna just mentioned is going to be required for everybody. So consistently with all of the supply chain is that one up, one down. Everyone is going to have their own risk assessment, such that we just keep tightening to make sure that when your consumer at a retail operation goes and buys your product, there's certainty that it is organic. It is the most validated and verified supply chain in the world, right? So that's the investment you all have put into this label. Speaking to that, I'm going to ask Kim, since it came up. So Kim, the organic fraud prevention process, what does that look like, and how do people develop one?
Okay, well, hi everybody. First of all, I'm not Gwendolyn. I think if you walked in late, my name is Kim Dietz, and I'm actually the founding partner with Gwendolyn in Strengthening Organic Systems, which we started June, just this last month, just strictly to work on the SOE rule and regulations. So Gwendolyn and I both have quite a bit of background in regulations. And I have all of her packet, but I wanted to just share with you, so to answer that question, what are we doing? And it's not just us, it's everybody in this room, and it's particularly the Organic Trade Association and your certifiers and other consultants, really everybody who's in the industry, to help us make sure that we get this right, that the Strengthening and Organic Enforcement Rule is meaty and it does what it's intended to do, which is to prevent fraud in the supply chain, right? So there's some tools out there, and one of them is through the Organic Trade Association, and it's actually a fraud prevention program template and guidebook, right? Like, what do you need to do to prepare yourself for organic fraud prevention plan? So this is a summary. It's downloadable. Everybody can go onto the OTA website and get it. And it details, Gwendolyn and I co-chaired this committee through OTA, and it details what you need to do to have a really good organic fraud prevention plan in place. And of course, part of that is that one up and one down, right? Your supply chain is the key. Your supply chain is the one that you need to verify is certified. One up, one down. And ultimately, what the fraud prevention program is going to do is strengthen the entire supply chain. So if there is potential fraud out there, the certifiers can literally go through and actually verify the supply chain. So that is the intent of the rule. There's another tool out there, and I'm just going to share this stuff with you. So yesterday or this week, the USDA came out with the Strengthening Organic Enforcement Final Rule Primers, right? So get ready. And it's a lot, right? So it's a lot of pages, but it's a Q&A. It talks about the what ifs. It talks about who needs to be certified, why you need to be certified, and what they're going to look for ultimately, right? What the inspectors are going to look for when your facilities get an audit. So it's the real deal. We're all touching it in some way or another, whether you're certified today or not, whether you need to be certified in the future. So that's what we're doing as a consulting group, as advisors. The other thing I would just share with you, and again, is the resources. There are trusted advisors out there. So through the Organic Trade Association Food Fraud Program, there's some of us, like John Foster is a trusted advisor through Wolf and Associates. I don't even want to say D'Amadio. Wolf and Associates. And, we're there to help you get through this. So those trusted advisors are experts in the food fraud supply chain. And, you should utilize that, whether it's through us or whether it's through OTA or whether it's through another, your certifier.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think the thing with risk assessments that I always like to say about them is to recognize their dynamic, because everybody's going to set it and forget it. I did my risk assessment. Here's my fraud plan and how I'm going to implement it, and really utilizing resources, whether they be consultants or databases of information, that's what informs a really good risk assessment. And that will change over time. There will be regions of the world that are riskier than other regions of the world. There will be items that are riskier than other regions of the world. Those change over time. So as you create a fraud prevention plan, don't just set it and forget it. It becomes like that HACCP revisit, I'm going to do it once a year. Your supply chain, especially within produce, likely changes more frequently than that. And you should think about that as well, because your certifiers will be looking at that. NOP is hoping, right, that everybody is really being diligent on that. But as your supply chain changes, so do your risks. So think about it as a living, breathing thing, because that's what the fraud prevention plan is intended to be.
And I would say that, it's not our intention, those of us who are, regulation wonkies, it's not our intention to make everybody's life so difficult that you want to get out of organic. That's not the intention of this. So, keep it simple, keep it, you need to comply with the rule, but we're also don't want to make it so complicated that it's impossible to keep organic product flowing through the supply chain. So
I think you make a great point.
Yes.
It's like we've had some conversations over the last couple of days. it's as simple as it is difficult.
Yes.
Right? Like, we are the only industry in, as far as I know, that is asking to be regulated more, right? That does not happen anywhere in government. And we want this transparency and this trust to allow us to be the strong industry that we are. And, it takes all of us and it's relationships. And it is like the one up and the one down. You kind of mentioned, Joel, like, I work primarily with Four Seasons Produce, and, I ask up and I, trust them to make their decisions. And so as a retailer, my responsibility is to make sure that I can provide the most transparent and trusted product to my customers, but I have to trust my partners up the chain. So I know that my wholesale partners are there and doing those things, and I know that the growers and shippers are doing what they do. And, I think just as a, one-off, I was here at the first Organic Produce Summit. And, I remember it was a little bit of a, what is this show going to be? And here we are 5 years later, 6 years later, and there's a whole room of people here really fucking being curious about the organic industry. And that's where we are. Yeah, no, sorry. I used that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I forgot my bleep button.
Yeah.
Keep it real.
Nah,
Keep it real and simple. That's it.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right? But this is who we are, right? And so we have these conversations with our shippers and our growers, and I see more friends in this room than I, could imagine. And I see people that will be friends, right? And so this transparency and this trust, it's a one-up conversation, right? We need to know who we're working with, and we need to know what people are doing. And it's the regulation is kind of the paperwork behind that, but it's what we've all been doing this whole time in this industry.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. Is that we talk about regulation, it's a standard, right? But really, that standard is a byproduct of everyone's integrity in this room. That's what invested in it. That's what allowed it to evolve, and that was the intent of the organic regulation to begin with, right? Is that we're going to continuously get better. And you're continuously doing that for your customers, taking on more burden, paperwork, processes, to make sure that everything that everybody before you put into this still means something and is getting better over time. And you're seeing that the industry keeps growing. Consumers are looking for organic practices as well as sustainability, regenerative, as well as transparency. And when you think about it, it's not about adding paperwork. Right, like no one wants another paperwork requirement. But I think the thing to also recognize is that none of these likely are brand new. And I would encourage everybody to sit in their multidisciplinary room with other operations people and with your food safety and quality people, because so many facets of the NOP's program, whether it be SOE or not, are actually integral in other standards. So you can be really, really efficient in getting food fraud addressed because GFSI required it too. And you can and so did FSMA, actually. So it's like, if you can actually overlay all of these standards, what you have is a really, really well-run supply chain. That's really what it comes down to, is knowing who you're buying from, who you're selling to, and the ability to understand all of those pounds and distribution centers. And there are so many standards that try to get at that, and NOP has effectively done that with SOE. So be efficient. It's actually going to make you more efficient.
And we've been asking for this for years, as an industry, through the OTA or through the IFPA.
Yeah, SOE came
we
from
have
the Farm
been
Bill.
pushing for it. We are asking to be more regulated, and as a retailer, we are really wanting to provide our consumers the most trust that we can possibly provide. And it's really easy to say that from a one-up standpoint when I know my producers and my wholesalers, but when we can add a little bit of paperwork and regulation behind that, it's just more of what we need.
Yeah. No, okay. So,
well, I think I just want to while I'm on this. The highest risk we have as a trade, as an organic community, is those people that don't know about the rule, right? So it's going to come fast. As we said, really the next 3 months, if you're not certified, you're going to have to get certified in the next 3 months, at least start the process. And then those that are saying, look, I don't need to be certified, right? I'm exempt. And there's the exempt rule, the pre-SOE was, a lot of people were exempt, a lot of entities were exempt. And today it's like about this much, right? I mean, there's very few exemptions anymore once this rule takes place in March of 2024. So that's all of our jobs here today, is to try to go out, do the one up, the one back. But it could be 3 up, right? And those folks that are not prepared to be certified, that's our highest risk.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we got to get the word out, and we got to get them, the entire supply chain, certified if you are required to be, which most likely you are, right?
So
very few are not.
Also, this is not a big ask, right? This is a lot of what all of us in this room have already been doing, right? Like, we have the relationships, we have the paperwork, we have everything that's already, applying to this. It's a little bit of formality and a little bit of a, I'm not a regulatory guy, but it's a little bit of a complication. But all of us in this room, we have these conversations with people, and we know what we're doing, and we're working with the people that we work with for a reason. And it's just a matter of putting it on paper,
Well, I think the thing, so let's talk a little bit more about exempt operations, right? So Kim just reminded us they're actually very few. And there are very few entities now within the organic supply chain that will not be required to be certified. If you're wondering, we actually have a quiz available on our website to tell you whether or not very easily if you need to be certified, to help them make that
The answer
easy.
is probably yes. You do need to be certified, as Dr. Jenny Tucker would say.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to emphasize that is, Dr. Jenny Tucker, who runs the NOP, right, she's been very public saying, get certified. That's the intention of the rule, is to get certified. It actually makes everyone's life really simple. That being said, you're exempt. And so let's get into who actually gets to be exempt. And so as an exempt retailer, how do you see SOE actually impacting you?
Sure. Yeah. No. So I think we only sell certified organic produce. We're 100% organic in our business, and so this has not been a huge change for us as a business. But what it has done for me is thinking about what are the systems and the SOPs that need to occur, and the paperwork trail. If there's a misship of a conventional product into my store, we don't have to worry, luckily, about commingling and all these things. But I have to start working with my folks about what do you see coming on that pallet, right? And so every day document that, and luckily we have enough systems in place that we've been there for a little bit, but this has opened my eyes to kind of tightening up some of those standard operating procedures, and just making sure that my folks on the ground and working departments are really being aware of the importance of these new rules. And so it's been a really, like I said, I'm not a policy guy. So I tried to make it a fun conversation. It's hard to make a policy thing. Yeah, I have not mentioned that it's SOE related, but I'm like, hey, we're gonna check in our pallets a little tighter, So it's it's kind of about talking to folks and knowing your audience, and yeah, absolutely having things tightened up a little bit, and I love that, and I think
we all benefit from
that. So there's a little bit of creative tension there, though, right? Because on the one side, having increased regulation allows for greater transparency and more confidence in the product that you're getting is organic. On the other side, it's a massive barrier to entry. And so, if you think about, maybe a small grower that wants to get into organic, and then we say, look, it's very easy. All you have to do is just go to this one website and then just download this 500-page manual and then just read it. And
fill in the blanks.
Yeah, it's just very, very straightforward. And so it's just a massive barrier to entry. And part of the vision and the idea about organic is that we're growing crops in a way that we used to grow, right? That's kind of the vision. Well, in the way that we used to grow, is a whole bunch of small people, right, growing their small crops and being able to bring those to the market and get the very best price for them. And the concern that I would have is that as we layer these additional layers of regulation on top of it, that those small growers are like, oh my gosh, this is just too much for me. I can't do that. So one of my goals is to put together a program, put together a system that some of our community growers, right, so some of our very smallest growers that have maybe 3 or 4 acres that are selling into our system, that they can have confidence that if they want to grow those 3 or 4 acres organically, that we have a system that they can go ahead and do that. So that's kind of my vision is that we can get there. But there's a little bit of creative tension there.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is, we've been working really hard in the organic space to reduce the amount of plastics.
Yeah.
And there's some risk that potentially this could cause an uptick in packaging and how much packaging we're using to try to avoid certification. So, that's another piece. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah.
And now I'm the moderator.
Now you're the moderator. Go ahead, guys. Keep going.
Yeah.
I would ask you that over beer.
Well, so if you look at the SOE regulation, they say retail packaging 5 times, right? There are 5 times the term retail packaging exists in the SOE. And with regards to tamper evident, it only says packaging, right? So tamper evident does not mean tamper evident retail packaging.
Yeah.
It just means tamper evident packaging. So one interpretation that I'm kind of rooting for is that if we wrap all of our pallets, right? If we wrap our pallets, then in order to remove any of the fruit out of that pallet, then you'd have to cut that pallet wrap, and so that could be interpreted as.
All right. Well, let's stop there.
packaging.
Yeah.
Let's stop there and say, okay, you wrap your pallet, and it's tamper evident.
Yep.
Let's not even touch that. We don't want to wrap everything, but let's just say we wrap it, and it goes to a distributor, who then breaks that pallet to assemble more trucks to go out to your stores. Did you really address SOE? Because now all these other people have to.
Yeah. So
handle.
what we did is we addressed SOE for our own sweet selves, right? For one up and one back, which is our responsibility. And then other people, they're like, hey, you know what? I want to break this pallet. No problem. Absolutely can do. But if you're going to break the pallet, then you have to be organic certified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing
that's so important. Yeah. And again, just from the retailer standpoint, asking the one up, because I'm more of a one up than a one down, right?
Yeah.
You guys have the middle ground, and knowing that my providers are certified and knowing that I have that relationship with them, and if I have new providers that are not certified, and asking those questions of, you got to get certified, right? And this makes it more simple in a lot of ways. It's complicated. It's a regulatory thing, but now with SOE, we can say, hey, this is really important, right? And so we can say, are you certified through your supply chain? And are your suppliers certified through that supply chain?
Warehouses, distribution
Absolutely.
locations. So it's all those places in the middle, right, in between. We know point A and point B are certified, and you're buying from somebody who's certified. But if it stops anywhere in between on the supply chain, that's that one up, one down. You got to either, and it's not in a tamper-proof evident package, then they have to be certified. If it is, and they don't change the form, they don't repack it, they don't take it apart and put it on a different pallet, then it's remaining its integrity. So that's the key. And our advice is to really look at every step along the chain, right? Do that supply chain evaluation. Sit down with everybody in your company and your next suppliers and your distributors and sit down and what does it look like? Like, have the conversation, because there will be gaps. And if there's a gap, then the product isn't certified anymore. So that's all of our charge, walking out of this room, is
Kim,
look at that supply chain.
Those are such easy conversations in the industry. Like, back to my point about having a room full of friends and soon to be friends, right? Like, when we're having these conversations, we're all seeing the same struggles, whether it's a retailer, a wholesaler, a grower, or whatever you're doing throughout the supply chain. When we can have those conversations in an honest way, it just adds a very clear point of that conversation, right? Like, is there a certification in that mix rather than like, are you a good dude, And,
I think there's 2 points, though, when you think about that, right? Is you sit in your conference room or in this room and you say, yeah, we've got it handled, right?
Do an audit.
But then
Do a mock audit.
you're like, yeah. I don't know how many times I hear this when I talk to somebody. Yeah, most of the time that's what we use that distribution center for, or storage facility. Most of the time, I'm like, oh, really? Most of the time. Well, there's occasion I'm like, yeah, see, that's the piece that you need to be asking the question. Because like most people, when they sit in the room, like, well, we only handle bulk, packaged, tamper-evident material through that storage warehouse, except for the day that a truck accidentally showed up at the wrong facility. And how often does that happen? Oh, once or twice a year. Well, those are the ones that you need to really be hyper-fixated on. As well as I'd really like to emphasize, there are exemptions. I just said Mom's Organic is a retailer who is exempt. That doesn't mean you're excluded from requirements. They actually have record-keeping requirements. They have transaction handling requirements that are still required under SOE and in NOP. So like they would be subject to an investigation, even though they're exempt. So they're exempt from certification. They're not exempt from any requirements. The other thing I'll highlight, too, is that if you think you're a retailer and you're like, I'm good, I'm exempt, there may be operations within your retail business that actually do require certification. So if you may have a storage facility or a DC, or you may have, if you do online orders, you may have a place that actually assembles those. Those need to be certified. So don't just think, well, I work at a retail company, I'm therefore exempt. It's not based on that. It's based on what you're doing.
So I'll say, I've worked in, it came up through produce departments at my company, and I remember distinctly a customer holding a gem over the grapes and telling me that, oh, these are not organic. They are not organic. These got sprayed. They told me very specifically, these were sprayed at the border, okay? And so, I obviously have no logical answer to that, but I do think my anecdote in this sense is I can say, and this is what I use in my business, is, we get questions about all sorts of things that are not necessarily applicable to the certification, but I can strongly say we are selling USDA certified organic produce, and we oblige by those standards, and and we trust those standards, and so whether it's a gem hanging over a grape or somebody questioning, when we have that transparency and that trust through our supply chain, that's what I can speak to, and that means something to me when I can speak to my customers.
Yeah, and I'll just say that, when I was at PCC Community Markets before OGC,
we
had some of those same
You probably
people.
had some gem hangers,
too. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And whatever makes you comfortable is good. But,
no, but it's real.
Yeah.
It was definitely sprayed.
Yeah, but what's interesting about this rule, okay, it's the first biggest change in 20 years. We know based on OTA's research that consumers and eaters, however you want to call it, folks are sitting down at their dinner table and expecting the organic seal to do a lot more than it already is. And you can look at the research online. But we need to have more of these changes and continuous improvement and evolution of the seal to keep up with consumer expectations. The animal welfare rule took 15 years to get through. I mean, we're hoping that this is going to be a faster pace in terms of change in the organic seal. And so let's help each other. The change is happening. It's going to keep happening. Change is hard. So how do we help each other in the trade, really lift each other up and learn these things? One of the biggest things we know is that most people don't understand this rule.
Well, yeah.
So let's help each other. As more change is coming.
Your point, we're already doing so much of that. Whether it's formal or informal, we're doing so much of that in a conversational sense. We're all working with our buyers and our sellers and our, every up and down that we want to talk about. And it's really just a matter, and it's an 80-page document. Gosh, I do not like reading that document. I was I never used ChatGPT in my life. I was like, could I get ChatGPT to just tell me what I need to say on this shit? But it's not revolutionary in terms of like the folks that we're already working with, throughout the supply chain. We're already doing this from a transparency standpoint. We have these handshakes. We have these personal connections, and we're just working on formalizing it.
Well, I just heard the claps. I know we're at time, but I think if you take anything from this, there's a lot with SOE. There's a good likelihood that you have people or yourself that need to be certified, so you want to find that out now. There's many different facets where it comes to packaging, where it comes to distribution, supply chain. If you have questions, the time is now to ask them. And you're at a great event to talk one up and one down about organics.
Ooh.
Wow.
Lights off, Joelle.
Dang.
That was like a plan.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Great.
good. Thank you, panel. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.